All right, Alex. Well, thank you for joining us for 1.73 Mission Over Measure episode 2. We really appreciate you being here. I'd like to get started off with just a macro view of who you are, how you got from where you grew up, where you're from, and to where you are today.
Certainly, Henry, Preston, thank you for having me. Appreciate the opportunity to have a conversation about something that I deeply share a passion about, which is, there's nothing you can't do if you put your mind to it. But I'm Alex, founder and CEO of a company called DX, which was started 9 years ago, 10 years in April. Can't wait to celebrate 10 years. It's almost like a marriage. 10 years is a big one.
Congratulations, by the way.
Thank you.
That's like a tiny. There's just a few organizations that ever make it past 3 to 5 years. Nice work.
Yeah. You got to be. That's something to be grateful for. So extremely grateful for it, and all those that have helped us get to this stage, of which I'm sure we'll uncover some of the stories of how we got to where we got to throughout this conversation, which I'm looking forward to. Prior to where it all began, so I grew up in the UK, as you can tell from my Chicago South Side accent. Moved here in 2005. Before that, grew up in a small little village called Aberley near Birmingham, Worcester, which is where the best sauce in the world is from, Worcestershire sauce, or Worcestershire sauce as we say. So that's sort of near my hometown. I was a trainee school teacher, of which it didn't work out very well. So I moved from school teaching to teaching adults, which is just as worse because they talk back and don't have as much of a curious mindset as children. So that's been doing essentially that for 22 years. It's really, for me, developing human beings is a subset of teaching. It's supporting people's mindset to do their best work and be their best selves. And worked at a previous company where the opportunity to move to America came along, and I jumped at it because this country is a great place to be for our industry. It's there's a curiosity for leadership development that is infectious, supported, and has the resources over here. So happy to be here, and happy to be here in this conversation.
I love it. So you didn't, when you moved here, you said 2005?
Yep.
You didn't just come and start DX. It was you came over for working for another organization.
Yes. So I joined that organization in 2002. And actually, even in the interview process, I asked the question, is there any opportunity to work globally? Because I just wanted to do that. And they're like, yeah, sure. Not too sure they were knowing what they were saying yes to. But after 3 very successful years there, I asked the question, hey, can I help and support your growth in America? They tried before and it hadn't worked out according to plan. And they're like, yeah, why not? And literally sent me packing with a laptop and a phone. And I supported and grew the US operation until the point where I started DX.
Got it. And why Chicago?
They had a real small operation there, like 1990, late 90s. And I just had the opportunity to fly into Chicago just to be here to check it out. And I just fell in love with Chicago. The fact that there was a beach in a big city, there's this huge big lake, and it was very, very alike to Birmingham, and where I grew up, it's a old Rust Belt city, manufacturing core, deep values, and I'm like, I could feel at home here. So just put a pin in it and said, let's do it.
Yeah. What was it like? Well, that's not like in the States where you move from, I don't know. Well, I grew up in Chicago. Henry and I were both born in Chicago, but we moved to Detroit 20 years now. I mean, it's 5 hours back, right? Without traffic. I mean, coming from, is it Adelaide? Abilene?
So Aberley is a little village Aberley, which has got like more sheep than it has people, but you know.
which that's conversation for a different podcast, right? like that's a big change. Like what was it like leaving life a long ways away?
Um, it depends on what kind of curious mindset you live life with. For me, it was it was for me personally, it wasn't much of an issue. Again, I think when you, depending on how you go about your life, when you're given a unique opportunity, and even if you don't have any friends and you don't have any clients, some people can see ambiguity as an opportunity to do great things. I have a low preference for clarity, and I can revel in creating my own clarity. I know that's not for everybody, right? Every human being is built differently. But the mindset that I'm gifted with, which my mum gave me, and there's some good and bad in that. This opportunity I had no issues. There was no little fear, and I was pretty successful from the get-go. But I know that's not for everybody.
No, I mean, you can imagine just well, perhaps in a time of life where you didn't have as many things, there weren't things potentially holding obligations, responsibilities that were necessarily holding you back or keeping you someplace that you'd have to figure out a way to how to either change or break some of those ties. But yeah, certainly a big leap of faith.
Yeah.
So it's interesting in the context, Alex. So we were chatting a little bit before we started recording today about this like what did we start this podcast for, and Henry was just sharing how in not just in the entrepreneurial world, but that's most of the types of folks that we interact with, that at some point they're presented with some obstacles, and even times where somebody says, maybe even a few people say, Alex, you can't do that. Like you bring to them an idea, or you say, hey, I think I'm going to go head in this direction. They just simply say, good luck, which is really code for there's no way that that's going to be successful. If somebody said that to you, who was it and what happened?
It's probably more than a handful of times that people have said that, but I think the one that comes to mind immediately is when I told my mum, I'm thinking of coming to America, Mum, and starting my previous employer's business in America. She's like, you can't do that, and listed off numerous reasons why that's a crazy idea. You don't know anyone over there. They have no business over there. All your family's over here. You don't. Why would you want to leave that? So that kind of accelerated the timescale of my leaving of the UK to come here, just to prove that I can do it. But it was, I think, again, depends on your mindset when someone says you can't, what you do with it. I remember someone telling me in my previous company I wanted to build a new product line. Similar reaction. You can't do that. This is our product vertical, and you want to create a whole new product line. Yeah, I've heard enough stories from potential clients saying that this is a business need. Well, that's not what we do around here. Same thing. Well, let me prove to you that was wrong. I think there was a desire to go. How can you say you can't do it without the necessary data to support that? So that's the second time I remember someone saying I can't, and I just went out of my way to say, well, let me test that theory.
Yeah. Well, exactly. Well, and look what happens, right? When you poke at that, and I say that. Well, I'm not going to speak for you. I know in my something that has been I'll use as a lever at some point is those folks. Unfortunately, it's been a small number that have said you can't do that or some form of that. It is sometimes nice to be able to say, but I did. And not to make anyone wrong, or me absolutely right, but just, if someone's going to present a gate, and sometimes they're higher than others, like, boy, how satisfying is it to be able to leap over that? Um, so curious on, what do you think some of the measures were, yardsticks, criteria? I mean, if you imagine, like, what was it that had your mom or your colleague, like, what were the yardsticks they were using to say, like, you know what, Alex, you can't do that. It was interesting when you mentioned your colleague, like, well, we don't do that. I mean, how many times have we heard that in business? That's just not something we do. So history might be a yardstick or an obstacle that gets thrown up. What else?
What's interesting in both of those case studies, that historical view which blinds us, right? For my mum, I'm the first person to leave the family, right? And no one has since. So I fled the nest. So what's her yardstick was, no one else has done this before. Surely this can't be, from her point of view, speaking on behalf of her, but I can imagine this doesn't seem viable, right? You're going against the grain. So the yardstick is, in her case, many years of history, biasing her and anchoring her opinion on what can and can't be done. And no right, no wrong. I don't hold it against her, but from her point of view, by saying this has not been done before, are you sure this is the right move? I get it. With my boss at the time, here's our vernacular, here's our product line, here's what we've been successful at. You're asking us to give you resources to do something that hasn't been done yet. It hasn't been done. I think that's the key, right? It hasn't been done yet. I think that's just a whole change of reframe of, it hasn't been done, but let's be curious and let's look at that a bit. Well, why hasn't it done? What's led to that? But I think, I'm all about, our business is all about understanding people's brains and why we do the crazy things that we do. But some of those yardsticks are very much built upon bias, which is not right, it's not wrong. It's just how our brain works. Our brain is a very fixed mindset piece of machinery. It does take a lot of curiosity and a lot of having to ask the tough questions that no one else is willing to ask to bend the rules, per se. And I think a lot of us in the entrepreneurial world it's funny because you think about corporate America, then you think about entrepreneurial America. They're not the same, right? I'm success. DX is still here nearly 10 years because I bend the rules. There is very much a growth mindset you have to have a growth mindset to operate in the world that we operate in. There's a little bit more of a fixed mindset. I'm sorry, corporate America, but then the rules are different in corporate America. You've got more rigidity and more structure. So just some of those measures are really built on the environments that we're walking into, both in the family world and in business.
Alex, okay, Henry, go ahead.
No, I wanted to touch on, you talked about, you're in the business of figuring out why people do what they do, or how people's brains work in relation to fixed growth mindsets. Where do you think your desire to prove people wrong or to break through those measures originated? Was it just something that you were always, like you were kind of always the, what, I'm going to prove people wrong? Like there's a little bit of spite with it, or just something like what made you want to prove people wrong? Because it's very easy to just, take the easy route and say, you know what, you can't go to America. You're like, you know what, maybe I can't. You let the doubt in,
Oh, that's a tough question. My immediate answer to that question, I don't know if it's the right answer, but we'll go down here, is that, as everyone always has told me throughout my life as a young kid, Alex, you're the only one in the family who talks to adults. So you have this ability to talk to adults at the age of 7, and everyone seems to love you because you have this curiosity. So I've always had a curious mind, and my brothers and sisters and parents told me that. You just have a very curious mind. But it goes against what I say, which is leadership. You're not born to be a leader. leadership is learned, and a lot of what we're talking about today is about leadership. It's whether you are CEO of a company, whether you're an individual contributor, whether you're a soccer coach or anybody. We all have this ability to lead other human beings and to positively influence them. So we're all leaders at the end of the day, and I believe that leadership is learned. But I think what you're getting at is I have, genetically speaking, was disposed with a very curious mind. So to answer your question, some of it is just genetically. I was always from birth challenging the status quo. And then there's probably inflection points throughout your life that really trigger what you're born with and double down on it. Like, for example, at school, I was the only person in my school, Shrewsbury School, to fail mathematics at A level, and physics, by the way, math and physics. And for the opposite reason, my tutor told me not to do math and physics, so I did it anyway. So there's an opportunity. There's a time when someone said you can't do it, and actually I couldn't, because again, some brains are really good with numbers. I'm not as good as others. So they told me I couldn't do it, and I didn't do it and failed. But that still triggered I'm still going to go out there and figure things out. So there's that's the flip side of you can't do it, and actually I couldn't do it, and I tried it anyway. So there's a story of my growth mindset probably got the better of me, of trying to do something that I am just not naturally, didn't have the core strengths and competence to do. So a long-winded answer, I think some of it's innately in there, and you can just got to uncover it. And for others, it's not innately in there, and we still got to uncover it. I still think a curious mind is probably one of the most important things that we can all live with.
So is leadership, maybe effective leadership, is it a mindset or is it a skill?
Both. I give the opinion and happy to talk it through. But for me, what you value, mindset, drives how you behave and how you turn up. Values change on situation, are very state dependent. But if you have a selfish mind, if you have a narcissistic mind, that drives narcissistic behaviors. So that mindset. Now, can you train for that? Can you develop a selfish mind? Yes, you can. But if you lead with a selfish mind, I'd hate to say that leadership is almost just going to be alien to you. So for me, what you value, mindset, drives how you behave, which is how others experience you, which is leadership.
So go ahead.
Yeah, so yes and yes, I think.
Okay. Well, it's interesting, and it's such a great way to explain it in terms of, I was on the phone earlier today with a gentleman who does strategy work in organizations, and his approach is to actually get down into the belief system of the organization, which certainly is, I'm presuming, is driven by the belief systems of the individuals that happen to be in it. And that strategy fundamentally is typically approached from a very analytical perspective. Who's the market we should approach? And we go through all the history or the opportunities in the marketplace, our products or services. He was just analyzing a lot of data and then formulating an answer. And his approach is, what's the organization actually believe? What's the organization actually value? And maybe that's a better foundation for answering the question, what market should we serve? And it's very interesting because I don't think there's a one is better than another. And I understood from your answer that you've got to have both. I mean, I've got to be clear on what I value, but I also have to develop the skills or develop the behavior that translates to the actions that others witness, so that I do fulfill, at the very least, leadership responsibilities.
Which if you think about that train of thought, can be applied to any team. For some bizarre reason, as you were talking, I went back to Dominic, my son, who's 7. We put him in an Arsenal training camp soccer training camp.
Mm-hmm.
The first thing that came out of the coaches, the first thing they communicated to my son and the kids was, here's our values at Arsenal. And as I watched them coach Dom, it's both how they behaved, what they rewarded the kids at the end of the day. It wasn't how many goals you scored, it's how you operated as a team. It's did you have a selfish mindset or a selfless mindset? Did you operate as a team? It was fantastic. So just bizarrely, I went to Arsenal. Sorry guys, I'm an Arsenal supporter. I used to be a West Brom supporter. That's a conversation for another day. But then household. So I've got a little post-it note here. I remind myself, family values.
Yeah.
Caroline and I, we haven't done it yet. We talk about it a lot. While I married her because we have a similar set of values, as parents, we need to define the values that we will model and we want our kids to model, which drives how we behave. Preston, you've helped my company DX do our values. And I think to finish the point, and you got me thinking, which is one of our values is humility, to be humble, non-negotiable. Well, shouldn't we work with customers, to your point, where's the humble space? What kind of industries and marketplaces have humility as a core value? We should, again, if that's our value as a business, we want to align ourselves with people who also have humility. Because for me, the biggest problem we've got in the world right now is value alignment. My job is to hire people with those values. You might have other values, and of course you do. But to survive and thrive in DX, you've got to demonstrate these three values. But it's also probably how you treat each other, how you treat our customers, and probably what customers that we go after. And I think that values alignment piece, imagine living either as a kid or working in a soccer team or working in a business where what you value is not treasured by your boss or the organization. That must be I know it is because I've done it. It hurts the brain. And when the brain is in pain, not much good can happen because you can't go through adversity and you can't be resilient if you're in survival mode.
Well, I love it because you're pointing to some of my takeaways from your book, which is a wonderful book, Care to Win, the 4 leadership habits to build high performing teams. And inside of it, you talk about you point to Carol Dweck's work around that fixed and growth mindset. You said it several times in our conversation today. Could you just give us just so we're on the same page, give us kind of your definition of what does it mean to have that fixed mindset? What does it mean to have that growth mindset? So and maybe a couple of examples of how you see it play out in the work you do.
Yeah. For trying to put it into layman terms, for me, a fixed mindset is the belief that there's nothing that I can do to improve in X, whatever X is, whether it's leadership, soccer, math, whatever it is. It's that fixed mindset of my skills and attributes and talents are fixed essentially at birth. Like I am the best math person there is, and there's nothing I can do to improve. And I believe that. Whereas the growth mindset of course is I don't believe that I'm the best, and there's nothing I can't do to improve in whatever it is. And remember, it's state dependent. You can have a fixed mindset as I do for cooking. I truly believe I was born to be a horrific cook, and everyone who I work with agrees, especially my wife. So, but because I believe it inhibits my ability to therefore cook. I walk in going, well, I'm going to screw this up. I'm going to screw that up. I'm going to burn this. I'm going to burn that. And I inevitably do because I believe it. I have a growth mindset for leadership. I believe I have a good day, I have a bad day, and I just strive to get better every day. And I am not there yet. That would be how I position the fixed and growth mindset.
What kind of values, if they're able to, would pull you out of a fixed mindset into a growth mindset?
The 3 that come to mind are my 3 favorite values that I personally live by. So vulnerability, humility, and curiousness. Vulnerability is that being comfortable in your own skin and the ability to admit mistakes, ask for help, be cool with failure, right? For me, that triggers a growth mindset, right? By being vulnerable and being open with others and to yourself about being imperfect is non-negotiable. Curiosity. How can you combat the belief that you're fixed at birth or fixed in a certain skill if you're not asking questions, right? 2 ears, 1 mouth. So curiousness is asking, not giving. So by being curious, you are combating the fixed mindset. And I think humility is no different to vulnerability. They're probably very similar in approach of, hubris is unfortunately the biggest contributor to the fixed mindset, and that narcissistic, selfish, self-centered mindset, of course, will drive a very fixed approach. It's my way or the highway. It's all about me versus it's all about us. It's all about you. And I think humility and vulnerability probably work together to combat narcissistic tendencies that we're hardwired with.
Alex, what's the payoff for, and I know we're kind of jumping around here. What's the payoff for the fixed mindset?
Me. It's the payoff is me, right? It's about me looking good. It's about me being in the light. So if your mindset or your value is how do I survive and how do I get through life, and I'm sure the fixed mindset is good for you. Vice versa, the growth mindset is good for. Now I'm speaking in general terms, but I can just try to answer your question. I think it's good for you if that is what your belief mechanism is.
I want to touch on kind of the values and behaviors, and I want to make sure I'm understanding this. Do values influence the behaviors, or do the behaviors influence the values you have? And how could someone, do you think, whatever it is that's true, whether it's values influence behaviors or vice versa, how would someone fall out of a growth mindset into a fixed mindset because of that?
Yep.
Am I being clear in what I'm asking?
I believe so. Okay. Let me try and answer this in terms of the workplace, just because, a lot of the people listening, we're working of the 168 hours a week that we get, we spend way too much at work, but let's not go down that path. So let's just think about that. I love the question, by the way, Henry. So let's do values and behaviors first. So DX, my personal values are humility and vulnerability, and our business values are aligned to those, similar, but we got curious, hungry, and humble as our values. So that drives how I behave. So new people coming into DX see that Alex is always demonstrating humility, is always being curious and asking questions, and is a hungry human being, and is very passionate about the work that we do. With basic mirror neurons. So if I was to put a pinprick into my finger right here, and if I was to bleed, the same neuron would fire in your brain that's firing in my brain. I'd feel the pain, but you'd feel my pain. In a crib at birth, all babies cry. When one cries, they all cry. So we're hardwired with mirror neurons. So if I consistently behave in a certain way, it rubs off on others, and they will either come with me and follow with me, or check out and get out, because it goes so against their value set that they're like, ugh, don't like this. So from a corporate business point of view, what I value as the leader of my team, and therefore creates how I behave, others will either check in and do more of it, or check out and get out of it. Vice versa. I love your question. And what you see of this a lot in corporations and businesses and teams where the values aren't stated and just stuff happens in osmosis. When a team behave in a certain way consistently, because they've decided that for either together, like, hey, our boss, so let's all group together and let's behave a certain way. When they do that, and the boss of the team or the organization see that consistently, that can go back to the values, and people can go, well, this team's working, they're behaving this way, they're performing really well. Well, what are they doing? Why? And then we can, because they value this. And that can actually backtrack into changing the values of that team or the corporation. And you do actually see that a lot. And what you're seeing this in corporate America right now, right? A lot of teams and a lot of the young, because of what they value, is very different. We're 5 generations in the workforce. What I valued growing up, grit, determination, get your head down, just get it done. And we've got a little bit more grey hair that doesn't, some of my team members don't share those values. So I've actually had to change, me personally, and my company's had to evolve because, that fixed way of this is how it is and how it will be forever. It doesn't work. Humans change. So I think, long answer, they both can change each other. I think the behaviors can change the values and the values can change the behaviors.
So in that scenario, and I love how you put that, there's 5 generations currently working in our larger work. You look at the workforce in a ubiquitous fashion. How do you measure progress when you've got 5 different levels of potentially 5 different levels of measurement? What does winning look like, or how can we figure out what winning could look like when it seems some days there's just an enormous amount of disparity on what is or isn't important?
I think the measure of what it means to win is such a large variable. I think taking the current political climate, not going into that, but for me, again, the culture is a mirror of leadership. So our politics, because that's the macroeconomic, we look up there, that creates the environment. So I always go back to the saying, the culture of a team is a mirror of its leadership, and especially as a culture is a mirror of its leader. So the greater economic and political mindsets and values typically drive what comes below it. In our terms, corporations. So our measure right now, what I've seen in the last year is an exhausted, overworked, overburdened workplace. We're training thousands of people every year at my business, and the look on their faces is just getting worse and worse. I believe that typical measure, unfortunately, is very tangible in terms of the financial result. I don't believe that's the most important measure. But that's again, values. It all comes back down to values. What you value probably drives what you measure. So if you got a very hard grit results based values, then that measure is probably going to be hard based metrics. If you, like us at DX, very more people centric values driven by people centric leader, then you probably have people centric measures. I think what you value drives what the measure is.
What, if possible, do you think that there is a mission that companies can go on that can supersede all those different measures they have between all these different generations that hold all these different values? Do you think that there's some sort of binding mission or aim that everyone could align on, or do you think that aim still falls too much into the realm of what people value and how people behave?
I'll just give you my own anecdotal experience on this one, especially in working with some non-profits where they have a deeply entrenched mission. I've seen some gross mistreatment of human beings. So I don't think the mission, whatever that mission is, it can be weaponized. So just, especially in some of my friends in healthcare, right? We're here to save patients. We're here to save lives. I've seen more often than not that blinds and gives people an excuse to mistreat the people within the organization. So I don't believe there's a direct correlation between a mission and the values and the behaviors. They're all interconnected and should be, but mission alone, like anything in life, can be weaponized, sometimes unintentionally, right? we're going to save this patient at all costs. And I think it's at all costs, which probably means mistreatment of human beings working together to save that patient. But I don't believe anyone in the 4,000 on average weeks that we have in this life that you should go home to your family, friends, partner, with unnecessary stress on your brain and not being able to be present at the dinner table. It's just, life's too short. So to answer your question, I think mission alone is not good enough. There's more we have to do.
Yeah, I love that you brought that up, because I had never really thought about it in that way. Is the mission itself can be used against you. That's so interesting. It's really got me thinking. How do you think, or what ways would someone be able to remedy that or fix that if their mission has gone off course? It's the at any cost, or something like that. What could someone do to kind of realign with like the mission and actually hold on to the values and behaviors that originally drove it?
It's a great question. It's a tough one to answer so just take the average entrepreneur, average leader, right? So I started DX with a mission, right, to wipe out workplace toxicity. I failed at my mission because there's no one who started the business with me who's there now. I've lost more people than I've gained. So trust me when I say, as I have sent people home to their families and friends. I've lost people and sent people home, not from intentional mistreatment, but because, I had a bad day. I have bad days. I had bad months. It's hard. So I'm not perfect, is what I'm trying to say. And I've screwed up enough times. And I'm working on it. But really, anyone who runs a business tends to be mission oriented. We tend to start a business because we have a mission, we have an idea, and it serves the better purpose of the world. We're trying to solve for something that moves the world forward. That's what we tend to start a business with. And that founding entrepreneur tends to have a set of values. And those tend to drive who we hire, right? There's a bias called the similar to me bias. So we tend to surround ourselves with people similar to us. And when there's enough of us who are similar, that creates a sort of cultural norms. And that's where culture starts. And that continues until one day you get this inflection point to where things start to go wrong. It went wrong for me because I used to surround myself with people with grit, determination, perseverance, all the things that have got me to where I've got to. And that's a very fixed mindset. It's a very fixed way of doing things, to surround yourself with people similar to you. But you've got to really grow a business, you've got to leverage the perspectives of as many different people as possible to stop echo chambers happening. And that's where you really get an innovation from. So then mission, the values is the piece which let me put this in perspective. I have a family member who works for a financial service company, very well-known one. Their values are basically to screw you over. You are going to get rich. We're going to screw you for every penny possible. That's okay, because that's stated values, and that's how you're going to get treated. But that's okay. But I think the biggest problem that we've got is don't state something and do the opposite, right? That's called culture conning. That's dissonance, and I think that's a lot of the cause of human strife, is when you think one thing but are treated differently. It's like it's not good for the human brain or good. So creating those values for me is mission critical. Go figure, and then creating a set of behaviors and holding yourself accountable to those behaviors, especially if those values are not what you were born with, but you're doing it because, look, we have to value curiosity, even though I struggle with it, because I know it's a value that's going to help me support the mission of my business, in our case, to wipe out workplace toxicity. Not every value is the value of the entrepreneur, and I think that's probably a wise thing to do, is to have values that aren't based on the founder or the entrepreneur, and that do really push you to then look broader, to find people who aren't like you. Because for me, cultural adds versus cultural fits is even more important to building a sustainable business.
That's a really interesting way to put it. The cultural add versus, I guess, the mirror and matching of what already exists. Alex, in your work, when you go into organizations, which version tends to lead the cultures that you get invited into? Is it we do embrace this idea of the culture add, or is it we've got to figure out a way how to get everybody to fit in, whether it's round peg, square hole or not?
More of the former, more of the fit, because in the companies that we work with, which tend to be 500 to 10,000 people, I mean, with that many people, it's just hard enough to function as it is. But just, hey, we have made a decision that here's our 5 values, 6 values, and here's 10 behaviors. Just get them to, I wouldn't say fall in line, but to at least adopt that as consistently as possible is their main aim. And I respect that, because it's just, that's better than probably what happens normally, which is, it's like the wild, wild west. Alex does this and Preston does this and Henry does this. There's no consistent, for me, the stronger the culture is a subset of how consistently we treat each other. The brain, as you know, Preston, you talk about this, right? The alignment of expectations. The more that we align expectations, in this case around behaviors, the less the threat circuitry in my brain's triggered, and the more I can do my best work. So for me, consistency is so important. And the larger the organization, the more important it is to have some consistency between how you be treated in this team or this team. So more the former.
Yeah, and I really appreciate that you put it in that context, because you go back to, I think you were sharing about someone in your life or your experience work inside a financial organization where they clearly articulate like you're going to get screwed over, or our job is to screw others over. I mean, at the very least, that's like clearly communicated expectation. So you're not going in blind. And
Yeah.
One of the things I found really interesting in your book is you talk about this psychological safety and like creating an environment of actually being safe. It's interesting. I wonder how many people actually survive a culture like that, where they say in some form, you're going to get screwed over. Like, it's not necessarily what you said, Alex, what I heard. It's probably not going to be a real pleasant experience.
Yeah.
In the realm of psychological safety, like, who is it that can survive something like that? And what would drive an organization to create a culture like that?
You'll be shocked, because it's how many organizations have thrived with their employees being in constant survival mode, right? So psychological safety in layman terms is, for me, and how we view it, is the threat circuitry is not triggered in my brain, and I don't see you as a saber-toothed tiger. I see you as a safe blueberry to eat. Because when I see you as a safe blueberry to eat, I'm not going to run away from you. And if I'm not going to run away from you, I'm more likely to talk to you and speak up early and speak up often. And for me, when you speak up early and speak up often about what's important to you, we can do more of the stuff that works, less of the stuff that doesn't work. And because I got all of this stuff off my chest, I can go home to my friends and family stressless and being present at the dinner table, excited to come back to work the next day. Which also answers Henry's question earlier. Well, how do we do this? How do we maintain culture? How do we, if we're off track from when it comes to our values and our behaviors, how do we get it back on track? Well, I don't know what I don't know. And I can assume what I don't know, but when you tell me, that's the purest form of data. So, but companies survive without this data, because, a few people are bright enough to make good decisions, but it comes down eventually when our employees don't feel safe to speak up, because they're withholding information from us, either about what's working so we can do more of it, or what's not working so we don't do it. And and then you get the blackberries. I just go to Starbucks right now. I can't. I used to love going to every barista would have a smile on their face, and you get service within let's just call it a minute. It had a great culture, and Howard Schultz protected that culture, and as large as it got, it still maintained it. I go into a Starbucks now and I just want to get out as quick as I can. I can't because it takes such a long time to do my drink, but whatever. That the culture's, so I think to your point, and because I call it what you want. Something's going on in that culture, and then you get the Sears of the world, the Blackberries of the world, where that lack of psychological safety or just ability to speak up and or be curious enough to listen to your employees falls flat, and a business challenge, you can't overcome that business challenge and you're out of business. So for me, it's really important, but you can survive a certain amount of time without it, and as you see all the time. I think for long-term longevity and sustainability, you need your people, and organizations don't exist or persist without people. And imagine how much stronger and more successful you would be if you're not trying to make all the decisions yourself and be the hero, and you have a place where people are encouraged to, because you need to encourage it, to speak up early and speak up often about what's important. And imagine that sort of symbiotic relationship between a leader doing their best work and being the best possible, but their team holding them, wanting to help them and wanting to support them and speaking up, and a symbiotic relationship between the two. I think we've revered the hero mentality for so many years, but I think it's time, and a time is coming where it's not about one person leading a company. It's about we all work together to lead a company.
Yeah, that's such a great reminder. I mean, even in our tiny little business where 3 of 4 people are like blood family together. And, just the other week being called out. And I think you've got this great acronym in your book, AITA. What does that stand for again?
Am I the asshole?
Yeah, right. Well, I think I was wearing, I think I'm going to turn, I think it would be IATA was the shirt that I should have been wearing. I am the asshole. It wasn't a question. It was purely a statement. But realizing that how it got smoked out was, I uncovered, I wasn't being given all the information, and it wasn't malicious. I realized I was scaring people. I'm like, oh my gosh, that doesn't work. And beyond that realization of, well, I'll go back to that fixed and growth mindset. And I really appreciate your last comments about just either the culture improving, or us as entrepreneurs, or for us, our businesses to ultimately win, that we've got to take that position of humility and vulnerability, of that growth mindset. I was so clearly in that fixed mindset world of it's got to be this way. And by the way, I'm the only one that actually has the vision of where we're going. And I learned when we uncovered it, we actually sat down and had a conversation. Yeah, my direction was the wrong way. I mean, I was literally going down the wrong way on a one-way street. And I thought I knew better. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's you hit home for me when I'm just literally last week, I'm oh my gosh, AITA.
But it's unintentional. That's the crazy part of this is now times that by 40 million people doing this every day. The unintentional consequences of not managing how we turn up drives fear into people, which is really what psychological safety is all about. It's about reducing fear. It's as simple as that. But we're driving fear-based. Where I always say human beings are running advanced societal software, technology, on cave person hardware, our brains, and we're just not ready for the technology revolution. So we're all in survival mode. What you just presented, Preston, was just, that's your brain telling you that, no, I know this stuff. I am the brightest person here. It is my way or the highway, and I'm right. Not because you believe it, just your brain's telling you a little whisper, like, you're right. And it's probably quicker and easier for us to do it this way than it is to check out give you the flexibility and the agency or autonomy to figure this out. But you're a better person for it. But we're all, sorry for swearing, guys, but we're all assholes at the end of the day, because our brains are just trying to survive. And the technology revolution, because we're just processing too much information at once, is just creating these very selfish behaviors, but unintentionally for most people. There are some intentional a-holes, and we should run away from those people. But a lot of them are unintentional. And it's not because they are an a-hole. It's just because they're in survival mode. And the environment that we're in right now is really tough.
Well, it was a great lesson to realize that I indeed work with some amazing people who have unbelievable and ever expanding capabilities, and they're not saber-toothed tigers that I need to run from. So,
Yeah. Well, I think that's a really good stopping point for this conversation. Am I the asshole? We'll let everyone ponder on that. Do some self-reflection. That's always healthy. But yeah, Alex, we really appreciate you being on this podcast. This was a really, really great conversation, and it offered a lot of different perspectives and angles on the mission over measure theme. Where can people find your business? Where can people get in contact with you?
Easiest place is LinkedIn. Just check out Alex Draper at DXLearning. I post on this stuff every day. My website's just dx-learning.com, and on Amazon, go check out Care to Win, and a lot of what my own personal stories with a lot of what you talked about, my own challenges in life and what the things I've had to overcome, which we all do every day, is in my book. Feel free to dive into that, Care to Win, on Amazon.
Yeah, and we'll put all those links below in the description. Alex, thank you so much for joining us. Hope you have a good rest of your day.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks,
Appreciate
Alex.
it.
See ya.